For this next video lecture, so this is for Module 11. So this is entitled Control Procedures for Payroll, Conversion, Investing, and Financing Activities. Okay, for our overview, so this module will include the discussions about the control procedures on the payroll, conversion, investing, and financing cycles of a business entity, just like what we have discussed under the revenue and expense cycles. For the learning outcomes, so at the end of this module, you will be able to understand the personnel and payroll department cycle, conversion, investing, as well as financing activities. And you will also understand the audit procedures and roles of the auditor in these different transaction cycles. For our content, so we have the following. Okay, first, for this video lecture, so we will focus on the personnel and payroll department cycle. Okay, followed by conversion, investing, and financial cycles or financing cycle. Okay, so to start with, let us discuss the personnel and payroll department cycle. So basically, the payroll and or personnel and payroll department cycle, so we have the following business functions which is related to it. Okay, first is the resources or the services. These are acquired from the employees in exchange for obligations to pay. So basically, since we are talking about personnel department, so this is focused on the employees. Okay, so they are the main source of human resource of labor in a particular business entity, aside from the aid of the technology and the equipment and machineries. Okay, so there is really a need for the employees to be present and for them to render their services, okay, for the daily operations of the entity. Okay, so in exchange for their rendered services, so they are paid for, okay, in the form of salaries and wages. Okay, and another is obligations to pay. Our obligations to employees are paid as mentioned. Okay, so this is under the payroll, okay, function of this cycle. Okay, so there are a lot of bases for providing the compensation of the employees. Okay, so as you all know in your cost accounting under the labor for accounting for labor cost. Okay, so it can be based on the number of hours worked, the number of pieces or items that was produced, or other bases. Okay, for that matter. So the activities in this cycle includes hiring, termination, maintenance, and personnel records, as well as the recording and the preparation of payroll. And lastly, of course, is the distribution of their paychecks or salaries and wages. So we will focus on these activities, and we will also provide or introduce the control procedures for each activity. Okay, so the following departments are usually involved also in personnel and payroll cycle. So we have the HR or personnel or human resource department. So basically, they are the ones who are responsible for hiring, promoting, and even the preparation of the payroll for our employees. Another department is also the production department. This is where normally the employees render their services which are related to the production of the goods, okay, or the rendering of services to our customers. Okay, so another is the payroll department, cash disbursement department. So this is where the payment of salaries and wages processes takes place. But in a simple structure of the entity, this department are also part or under the human resource department. Okay, so to start with, let us discuss the control procedures for the personnel department. Okay, so we have the following policies and procedures that should be applied in this department. Okay, first, personnel department should be responsible for interviewing, hiring, promoting, transferring, and terminating the employees. So basically, this is part of the human resource function, okay, in selecting the best candidate for the position to fill in the need, okay, for a particular employee. Another is for promotion as well, okay, with the proper and appropriate basis for promotion. So this is also under the personnel or HR department, transferring and even the termination of the employees. Okay, so there should be no other department that should handle these types of activities or transactions. So this should be under the personnel or human resource department. Okay, so next, personnel department should also initiate and update the personnel records regularly. So the purpose of this is to determine if a particular employee is qualified for promotion or if they need some additional enhancements or development through sending them to various related and relevant trainings, okay, to upgrade their skills, as well as for salary increase, okay, and maybe for provision for the provision of bonuses and or evaluation, okay, for uh, purposes of identifying if the employees are indeed following and doing the tasks that were assigned to them. Okay, so another is separate records should be kept for individual employees. So normally in an HR department, the employee has their own folder where the files and documents are kept, okay, for purposes of review, okay, for promotion as mentioned earlier in the previous slide, okay, and for retaining also the necessary data or details of the employees, okay, for the entity, okay, and this is done so that there will be an orderly manner of managing the files of each employees. Next, personnel department should also authorize and document the salary or wage rates and payroll deductions. So this is very important because this will be the basis later on for the accounting department, okay, in recording the payment of the salaries as well as the mandatory deductions which are due to the different government and other agencies, okay, for the for the withheld portion of the salary of the employee for their contribution purposes, okay, and aside from that, this should also be reflected in the individual pay slips of the employee once they claim their salaries and wages so that they will know how much was earned and deducted from their salaries and their net pay. Okay. Another policy or procedure is the personnel records should not be accessible to employees who are responsible for preparing, approving, or distributing the payroll. So again, in this case, we are emphasizing the segregation of duties, okay, from the custody, authorization, and handling or recording of the data. Okay, so we've mentioned that before, the reason why there should be a segregation of duties, that is to avoid manipulation of the records, as well as to avoid theft of cash or assets or resources of the entity. Okay, another is the personnel department should also prepare and submit personnel action forms to the payroll department. Okay, because the purpose of this document is to identify employees who are authorized to receive the paycheck and are used to reflect changes in case there is for their hourly pay rates, payroll deductions, and job classification. Okay, so this is normally based on this document. Okay, the record in previous slide. Okay, so where they document, okay, the details of the work, as well as the salaries and wages of the employees. Okay, so basically this will provide the source documents for recording if that particular salary or wage is accurate, and the deductions are also based on what is required, okay, by the different agencies. Okay, and lastly, when employees are terminated, the personnel department should without delay inform the payroll department, okay, about this termination settlement, and notify also them that compensation has already ceased to avoid payment of payroll to non-existent or ghost employees. Okay, so in this case, there should be coordination between the personnel department and the payroll department. But in a simple structure of an organization, normally payroll department is within the personnel department, so there is no problem with that. But of course, they should make sure that this was communicated to the person handling the payroll, okay, so that the name of that particular employee who was terminated will not be included anymore in the next preparation of the payroll for the payment for the next month. Okay, so again, that is to avoid a payment of salaries and wages to the non-existent or ghost employees. Ghost employees is someone who is listed in the payroll but is not actually an employee of that particular entity. Okay, so that's how it is. In some entity who are practicing this, what the reason behind for having these ghost employees is to claim, okay, that particular amount for themselves, okay, so that there will be additional compensation that they will receive monthly. But again, the personnel department as well as the payroll department should make sure that those listed as their employees are actually their employees and not someone who is not existing, okay, to avoid such fraud. So those are the different control procedures for our personnel department. Okay, so we will continue with the next department, which is the production or timekeeping department. So what are the control procedures that should be applied? So these are the following. Okay, for the production, first, production employees will prepare two types of time records. So normally they have this job tickets and time cards. Okay, so this will be based, or this will be the basis for the number of hours that a particular employee have rendered for a certain period of time or day. Okay, so job tickets can capture the time that an individual worker spent on each production job. So most probably the basis for their salary is the number of hours that was rendered by the employees. So if the use of biometrics is not feasible, okay, normally biometrics is the most reliable form of capturing the time in and out of a particular uh, employee, because in this case they will use the face recognition or the fingerprints, okay, to the machine to determine that that employee did enter in that uh, specified time in the morning, and uh, their time out in the afternoon. Okay, but if that is not feasible, then the entity could use clock cards instead, or magnetic ID, okay, to punch in and out, okay, for the beginning and end of their workday, to show the total number of hours that the employee has worked. Okay, so clock cards on the other hand is a piece of a document or magnetic card which is punched in. That is actually the traditional time in and out that was used, okay, to a clock, which in return, okay, once it is punched in, the time in the clock will be registered in that card, okay, to indicate what time does an employee um, time in and out. Okay, so that's how it works. But these two methods, the purpose of this is to reflect the number of hours the employee has worked for the day. Okay, so time cards, okay, as mentioned, will capture the time the employee is at work and are sent to the payroll department for calculating the number of hours that the employees have worked, for the purpose of computing also their salaries and wages to be reflected in their paychecks. Okay, and lastly, the hours worked should be approved by the responsible official. Normally, this is the responsibility of the supervisor of the employee. So he should sign the DTR, okay, which means that whatever in time that is indicated in that document is true, invalid, or correct. So this will be compared to the job time tickets with the employee clock cards, which have already been signed by the employees. Okay, it should be signed by the employees and their supervisors at the same time. Okay, so that's how it is for the production or timekeeping department. Okay, so those are the different control procedures that they can apply. Okay, so we will proceed with the next department. Now this is for the payroll department. Okay, so for the payroll department, we have the following policies and procedures. Okay, so the payroll department, they should be the one who are responsible for collecting clock cards or the magnetic IDs of the employees, and they will merge them with the approved pay rates, meaning number of hours reflected in those cards, then multiplied by the employee's pay rate, okay, and then to determine the gross salary, okay, and deductions will be withheld from their gross salary. Okay, and this is from the personal department's data, okay, to compile or compute the payroll or net pay for the period. Okay, so this is normally the function and responsibility of the payroll department together with the personnel or HR. Okay, so persons who prepare the payroll should be independent of the personnel and treasurer's departments. Again, segregation of duties, okay, is emphasized. Next, payroll department. This is normally part of the accounting department. So they should process the gross and net earnings for each employee and prepare a payroll register. So this is actually related to the previous slide, okay, where time or clock cards or magnetic IDs are compared, okay, to determine the gross pay, okay, based on the hourly rates of the employees. So another is the salaries and wages should only be computed for existing employees. So this was mentioned before in the previous department, where only those existing and currently existing employees should be paid for their salaries and wages, and those who are terminated and the ghost employees should not be included in the list. Okay, another is all payrolls should be properly posted to the appropriate accounts, and it should be correctly summarized. So this will be based on the payroll register. So the gross pay, the deductions, and the net pay of the individual employees, okay, will be prepared. Okay, next, a separate payroll box. Okay, so a separate payroll bank account should be maintained exclusively for the payroll disbursement. And this account should be reconciled monthly by an employee also who is independent of payroll and treasurer's department. So normally, this is done so that the entity will make sure that there is enough fund to pay for their salaries and wages. Okay, and again, reconciliation of this should be made by the person who is not part of the payroll and treasurer's department. So there should be segregation of duties. Okay, just like in our receipt and disbursement cycle, where the ones who are responsible for the bank reconciliation is an independent employee from those who are recording and receiving the cash. Okay, the same thing also here in the personnel and payroll department. Okay, so the payroll department should also fill up an unsigned payroll check with an appropriate amount, and then it will be forwarded to the paycheck appropriate amount and forward the paycheck, along with the copy of the payroll register to the treasurer for signature. Okay, so here, normally, this is prepared, and then later on, the treasurer will fill in the other necessary further process for the payment of the salaries and wages of the employees. Okay, so the payroll department is only responsible up to this extent. So payroll department should also prepare and update the employee earnings record. Okay, so if there is any increase in the particular salary of an employee, so they should note that. Okay, next, payroll department should prepare also periodic governmental reports as to the employee's earnings and withholding taxes. Okay, because in this case, this is a mandatory deduction, and it is a liability of the entity to pay these taxes because they withheld it. The amount was withheld from the salaries of the employee. Okay, So they would also make sure that correct taxes are deducted and paid for. Okay. And lastly, the payroll should be reviewed for a reasonable or should be reviewed for reasonableness by management. This is to make sure that the payments, the salaries and wages are correct. No ghost employees are included in the list of the payroll register to avoid misstatements and fraud that may exist. Okay, so those are for the control procedures for our payroll department.